Hello, everybody. My name is Christian, and I am the founder from Core Recruitment, and we are running a leadership interview series looking at lots of different interesting people that are doing things from different interesting backgrounds. All of these interviews can be viewed on our website, which is www.corerecruitment.com. They're on lots of different channels like YouTube and Spotify as well, so you can see them anywhere that you want to. And if you've got an interesting story to share, or you've got somebody out there who you think we should be talking to and promoting them a little bit, then please do let us know. Now, I am super, super, super excited about the speaker that we're speaking to today, mostly because I feel like I was a little bit involved in her journey because I met her about 5.5 years ago at an event that was happening just after COVID was finishing. And there's a really incredible chief people officer who works in the facilities management and catering space called Stephanie Hamilton. And I placed Stephanie in various different positions. I stood at an award ceremony and Stephanie said to me, "You've got to meet Kat. We've just promoted her up and she's going to be diversity and inclusion lead for our entire business." Took over from the incredible Margot, I think it was, who was there kind of like before,
Yeah.
to kind of like reshape things. And Kat basically stood and talked at me for about 20 minutes about all the things she was going to do. And now, 5.5 years later, she has done all of them and more. So welcome, Kat Parsons. How are you?
Thank you very much. Thank you for that lovely intro. And to Stephanie and Margot. Margot is still there. She's in a global role. She's like, yeah, I'm in awe of Margot. So yeah, Margot Slattery is a great colleague of mine.
She is incredible. She actually did some diversity training for us here at Core as well. And the team
Oh,
afterwards were all just like, oh my God, we need to
yeah.
completely recalibrate the way that we think. Now, for those who don't know, you've just taken over as CEO of Umbrella, and just to maybe get
Diversity
us kicked
umbrella.
off,
Yeah.
Diversity Umbrella. So, just in terms of like, the organization, the business, can you talk us through what that is and what that encompasses?
So Diversity Umbrella is the organisation that is behind the British Diversity Awards, the European Diversity Awards, the Rainbow Honours, and the Employee Network Awards. So they're sort of our four massive events throughout the year, and they are so well attended. We have nominations coming from all over the globe. There's too many to even read sometimes. They are so popular, and that the events themselves, the venues, the hosts, these are like proper special in terms of that sort of key events for the year. And I've been in lots of different sort of sectors, and you go to these sort of sector specific awards. I've been in health and safety and construction and contaminated land and all these sorts of, arenas. But there's something about our awards because they are sector wide and they are huge. The British Diversity Awards, we had 1,100 people this year in March. That's a massive room of huge corporates, people at the absolute top of their game, that are competing against each other, to get recognition for all the work they're doing. So it's such an amazing vibe. And then on as sort of as part of that and as part of my role coming in, it's really about sort of opening the filing cabinet. I keep saying we obviously have all these amazing people on shortlist. We have these award winners and highly commended. And my role coming in is really to sort of open the door and share that best practice. So we are releasing winners blogs. We've got a global inclusivity membership, so we're really bringing companies together to have those sort of really sort of detailed conversations on best practice and roadblocks and frustrations and successes and all these things. We've got a podcast that's coming out soon. It's literally like go go go. So there's plenty happening.
That's incredible. And one thing that I love about the whole organization and all of your different facets is that the tone of voice is kind of unashamedly proud, which
Mm.
I think is absolutely incredible. And especially within the current kind of climate and even with your sponsors that you've retained and all of that kind of stuff. What have you noticed in the past kind of 2 years?
I'd say there was a conversation about do you call them the British Diversity Awards? Does that mean all of a sudden it's going to absolutely tank because everyone's shying away from these words because of external pressures? And I'd say we absolutely saw the opposite. I think a lot of people have been changing job titles and shuffling into sort of culture and well-being and these sorts of slightly more creative job titles, but the fundamentals are still there. People are doing inclusion work, belonging work, diversity work. It's key for talent and longevity and profitability of organizations. It's all there. It's just people are just being quite creative with the language. So I'd say we haven't struggled at all. I'd say it's probably faster than it's ever been. I think some organizations have been maybe slightly quieter. um, I don't think it lasted, and I think that actually just gave space for others who decided actually they needed to be more visible and show up. So we're full steam ahead.
That's amazing. Now, your career path, now we were going to put in a whole section about Kat's hair, just because like it was different when when I first met it, kind of like 5.5 years ago, and then it's changed, and then it's changed again, and then it's changed again. And I think Kat's hair gets enough.
Cat's
Well,
career
Kat's career
hair.
is probably Kat's career hair. Kat, but Kat's career wasn't the most kind of like usual kind of like path, and you've worked in some, I mean, pretty male dominated, kind of like traditionally male dominated environments, like engineering, health and safety, like facilities management, that kind of side of things. So, I mean, what got you into DEI kind of like in the first place when I met you at that kind of like event?
Yeah, I mean, I never thought this would be a role. I'd never even heard of an employee network up until about 7 years ago. I'd never heard of an ERG. Had to Google what an ERG was, and ERG is not what I thought an ERG was. Um, but my background, yeah, is very contaminated land engineering, hard skills, KPIs, budgets, deadlines, difficult clients. Like I absolutely love a high pressure and a tight deadline and all of that, and that's the environment I was thriving in. And because of that, I managed to get through to quite senior positions in those organisations. There was a bit of a push. I did feel I was being slightly sort of squeezed and not necessarily reaching the potential that I knew that I had. So there was choices to be made in terms of how, do you sit back and just take a decent paycheck? I'm not for sitting back. I'm terrible at sitting back. I like to be achieving and thriving and moving things forward wherever I can. So I moved out of engineering and environment into a health and safety role, and that was an interesting move for me. Again, still very male dominated in facilities management, but to be honest, it was an environment that, because I've only ever worked in male dominated environments, I know how to handle myself. So, and what I mean by that is I know how to show up in a room, and I know how to sort of shape shift so that I get what I need out of a situation, and I know how to position myself, as in even from a seating point of view, in a room to be able to get my voice heard. So I'd kind of learned all these things as I sort of went along, almost so that I wasn't like one of those women that would cause an
Mm.
issue. I very much was like one of the team. I've got value to add here, and I wasn't sort of seen as a threat or something to sort of just sort of swat to one side. Um, so that was just normal for me, really. And actually, when I moved into facilities management and the workforce was more like 60% female workforce, because of we had a lot of frontline staff that were sort of catering and caring roles and concierge, admin, those sorts of bits and pieces. I actually was a bit like, oh, this is actually very different. Like I've never worked in an environment that is so so female dominated. Um, so that was actually nice for me in terms of a career point of view. But so I've bounced from project management into health and safety, and then a role came up in the organisation I was in ISS, and they said, "Do you fancy working with Margot Slattery in this new role, this sort of head of diversity inclusion role?" And I immediately said, "No, like not interested." And and I think the reason for that was I kind of got, it's difficult, isn't it? You want to have like a bit of a career path and a bit of a thread so you know where you're aiming. And I'd kind of got on this sort of train of health and safety, and I could see how I was going to develop through the organization and where that would go. And I think this was quite a sort of sidestep, but equally still health and safety is very stats and data and things and stuff. And I think when I was approached about this role, I said, that's very fluffy. That's very soft. That's a lot of soft skills. I don't know if I'd be any good at that. And actually, my soft skills are my biggest strength. I can connect with people in a heartbeat. That's why I worked in health and safety. Tell me what the issues are, trust me, and I'll go and do something about it. So actually, what I thought was something that I wouldn't be very good at actually turned out to be the thing that I'm actually the best at. So I worked with Margot for a couple of years. Ended up moving across to Centrica British Gas, another male-dominated space. Absolutely, loved my time there. And then this opportunity came up. Linda Riley, who's the founder of this organisation and the awards, and has absolutely just trailblazed for year after year after year. She was looking for her next move in terms of that sort of exit strategy, and we had a conversation, and then within weeks, those conversations were finalised. So yeah, I've stepped into this role and I literally couldn't be happier.
Sounds amazing. Now, people who normally go into your kind of spectre of that kind of like side of things, I mean, normally come from kind of like an HR background or marketing background, that kind of side of things. But one thing which I find really unique about kind of like your background experience is it came up through that kind of harder kind of like operations route. So when you are
Mm.
sitting with your kind of peer group at that kind of level, do you find that you've got a very different perspective on how to implement DEI policies and what's going to actually affect the bottom line rather than others?
Yeah, I think that's actually been something that's been invaluable for me to be able to see. Everyone talks about the business case or the ROI, what you're going to get back for what you're putting in. And I think because of that project management, the budget side of things, the tracking, all of that, I think, has actually given me a slightly different perspective. So when I'm asking for something and I'm asking for investment or sponsorship or membership, I know exactly what that's going to look like to be able to sort of almost forward project to say, look, we're putting this in now, but this is what this is going to, this is the impact and this is the effect and this is what it's going to turn into, and sort of be able to paint the picture of that trajectory of that decision, as opposed to just having like a big wish list of all these things that I'd really like to do. Can I have some more cash? And I think you have to be really creative in this space as well, in so much that teams are always very small in diversity inclusion. Your counterparts are always in learning and development and recruitment and talent, and they tend to have bigger teams and bigger budgets. So it's how do you sort of make them your best friends so that they're sort of part of your agenda. It's not just sort of your strategy, it's our strategy and the organization's strategy. And I think that because it's such a difficult role with tight budgets, you really have to be like, well, how am I going to make impact here without having to dig too deep in terms of cash? And there's loads of things you can do, and you can see best practice all over the place. LinkedIn is absolutely full of it, where organizations are doing like brilliant things without having to spend millions.
Yeah. I mean, especially on that LinkedIn side of things and just generally with your approach, you've described yourself previously as being like a positive disruptor, but
Oh yeah, I
your
like to disrupt.
but your communication style, it does seem to cut through a lot more than kind of other people's does. Why do you think it stands out so much more than others?
I think it's I mean, I am horrendously open, probably to the point of being slightly too open. But I think if I say something that is the worst thing that could be said, and I do this quite regularly when I talk about things. I did a podcast when I was at ISS, and one of the leaders, I was middle management, and I'd invited this senior leader onto this podcast with me, and it's still that sort of COVID period, so you were sort of a bit awkwardly sitting opposite each other, and we were talking about the menopause because it's something that was not being talked about at all.
Yeah.
I was in health and safety. I've got a female-dominated workforce. I said, look, we need to be talking about this, and all these guys in this meeting were really shuffling. They were so uncomfortable. They did like, can we table this until next time? I said, leave it with me. Let me just play with something in the background and then I'll come back to you. So I did this podcast, and this leader was absolutely exceptional. She was so honest that she was telling me about her loss of libido and her vaginal dryness. And I literally did not know where to look. And then I thought, this is so refreshing, because actually, what more can you say that's any worse than what she just said? And all of a sudden, half the organization were talking about all of their symptoms and all of these bits and pieces. And I think actually for me, that was a real massive penny drop to say, like, I've experienced some terrible burnout in the past, quite recently, at the end of last year, to the point I couldn't form a sentence. It was absolutely crippling. So
Wow.
to be able to actually articulate that I come across really shiny, I love to be out and about and sort of look what I'm doing now, and have you thought about this? But to actually be able to sort of, after that period, to be able to come back and say, that was really bloody hard, like, and this is what I experienced. I was flooded. I couldn't even keep up with the amount of comments directly saying, I've felt exactly like this, and I've felt completely ashamed and invisible. And by the fact you've said it, there's nothing else that's worse that you can say. Like, you gave it warts and all. I think that actually it cuts through all of the sort of quite, this is an awareness day and this is a generic post about something that you should know about. Like, it is difficult, but I think the impact of just warts and all, I think, really resonates with people.
Absolutely. And if you're, I mean, whenever I see you, I mean, the energy level's 100%, the passion's 100%, the motivation level's 100%. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but do you feel like you need to psych yourself up before you walk into a room? Are there 5 deep breaths and kind of like, a chi moment beforehand? Is there just 95 shots of espresso? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's going on?
I think there's I know what I need to do when I'm in a space, and I think there's that very much. I wouldn't say it's masking, but I know what I need to do when I go in, and what sort of not necessarily expected, but how I want to present myself. And if I'm that sort of, that build up the train journey in. I've got a playlist that I like to listen to that gets me hyped.
Oh,
And if I
really?
listen to the playlist at the wrong time, then I get into this sort of, am I supposed to be hyped? I'm not sure. Like, um, just to get me in the right mindset for where I'm going into. And I think even that, so actually this happened really recently. I was at an event at the House of Commons, and everyone has to stand in the security line. It's really boring. Like, you're waiting to go in. It's sort of, I always make this joke about it being like you're going on holiday because you go through security. It's all boop, 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 and all this stuff, but you're not going anywhere exciting. You're just going into the House of Commons. And the woman in front of me in the queue, I didn't know who she was, and I made this joke about security and something else. I like a bit of humour. Anyway, didn't think much of it. Just said, enjoy your evening. Off you go, and off she disappeared. But 2 days later, she managed to find me on Instagram, and she sent me a message saying, I think you're the woman that I saw at the House of Commons. And I just want to say, I was having a terrible day, like terrible. And just from that interaction with you for 5 minutes in security, completely turned my day around. So I think there's that thing about, you don't have to be like headphones on, grumpy, like, oh my God, everyone's got their time to sort of decompress and, have that space. But actually, that little bit of me just cracking a joke will change someone's day. So I think it's, again, that kind of
That's
visibility
lovely.
and that kindness and stuff, I think that pays out more than people realize.
That's very, very, very lovely. If you don't mind, with that period, I'm sure was horrible, and
Mm.
please don't talk about it if you don't want to talk about it. But I always think you learn things from those kind of situations. So, like, what have you put into your approach, kind of moving forward, to kind of like, I guess, insulate yourself from that in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I marched through every red flag that there possibly was and was convinced that I was juggling everything absolutely perfectly. I love to spin plates, but turned out I was spinning the whole of IKEA. So that was, I think there has definitely been a period of reflection on what is healthy. And just because I can do it doesn't mean to say I should do it. Um, I'm very conscious of my time. So, I won't sit at my desk all day. You will not see me sat at my desk all day. Like, I make sure I'm out. I've got some fresh air, I've got some exercise, I've walked the dog, I've had a bit of a debrief with some people. It's a different way of communicating. I don't need to be sort of rooted. Um, and I think there's definitely a bit about being able to sort of honestly share the load as well. And especially in the diversity inclusion space, it's a really hard job because you're hearing from people constantly about their struggles and what they've found difficult, what's not working, and you want to fix everything. But sometimes it's really difficult because you can't, you can't at speed, and trying to sort of explain to someone that that's going to take, we'll have to focus on that, next year. It does weigh down on you. So to be able to have that sort of network of people that you can literally ring and be like, don't tell anyone, and that there's that sort of like that confidentiality. But by God, this is really difficult, and you can sort of you can get it all out your system, 5 deep breaths, and then you can then carry on. It's almost that recharge that you need. And I think I didn't offload enough, and I was convincing myself that I was handling and more, 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 more. I mean, I was balancing a massive house renovation at the time as well. And 2 kids, a dog, a full-time job, a wife who was away all the time. So there was quite a lot to handle. But
Jesus.
yeah, I should have. I think the reflection is I should have picked up earlier, and I wouldn't have got myself into that position because it took a lot to get back out of it again. So tough.
Yeah, really tough. Now, sorry, before we go too far past it, I have to ask, in terms of when you're on the train coming in and you've got the big moment kind of coming up, like
Yeah,
I'm imagining like Ali McBeal theme tune kind of time, like,
that is it.
that's it? Kind of like, can I
Yeah,
ask for songs?
I've got like a strut. There's always
Swagger?
yeah, there is. There's always some sort of pink song. There's a specific pink song, and it's all very sort of, there's really big beat to it. But that is the one that I know I'm in the zone, and I literally will just strut my way, quiff going in the wind. Yeah, I'm ready for an event
Oh, I love that. Absolutely incredible.
then.
Now, you've won plenty of industry awards yourself, and this is a little bit poacher turned gamekeeper now. And I know that you wouldn't get involved in all the judging of all of the awards on that side of things as well.
Yeah.
But do you think that's changed your approach in terms of like, how you look at these things? And also the thing I wanted to bring up on, and I know you mentioned the menopause side of things, but that was
Mhm.
recognized by the ROSPA as kind of like,
Yeah.
the initiative of the year when you were at
Yeah.
ISS. And I know
Yeah.
how many organizations actually modeled their menopause policies on the work that
Yeah.
you'd done, which has now affected thousands of people across the country, which is like a massive accolade. So how's that kind of
Mm.
changed your approach?
I'd say in terms of that that award was a funny one. So ROSPA is obviously a really high health and safety award. And at the time, I asked my boss, Rob, I said, do you think this is ready? Like this project, we've been working on for a good sort of 12 months. I said, oh, I think I might put this in for this because I think we've got, this is something, this feels special. And he said, oh, let's give it another 12 months. And I literally ignored him and put the submission in anyway. And I think there's that thing about having the confidence to be like, do you know what? No, we don't have to wait another 12 months. Like this is good and we need to be able to share it. So that, the nomination, everything went through. It was a really solid, we had evidence, we'd done so much with it. And the fact it then got picked up and sort of pushed out, across multiple industries was brilliant. But what that did in terms of personally for my career, there's that thing about recognition. Not only does it sort of feed you, I think it gives you this sort of this status, and all of a sudden people, like you were saying about Stephanie, are like, you need to speak to this person, they've got something to say, they've been recognized, and that builds and builds and builds and builds. So I have been incredibly lucky with the awards I've gotten. To get inspirational role model at the British Diversity Awards only last year was like phenomenal. And obviously now being on the other side of it, I don't touch the judging, I don't touch anything at all. Like I would be awful. I've been through my judging phase, and I think that was sort of part of why the direction of diversity umbrella is changing, is because the reason I was judging the awards, one was because I felt that there's only so much in terms of I'm nominated, I'm nominated, I'm nominated. It becomes noise, and I wanted it to be impactful, the ones that I was being recognised for. But equally, that judging piece, I was looking at 40 nominations across 4 categories. And then I was like, that's great. Cool, that's a good idea. Oh, let me write that down. And then I was like, oh, this is really bad. I don't know whether I'm doing this to support the community or actually just to fill my notebook of like really good ideas. So that was the reason, again, when I sort of came into this role, was like, throw the doors open, because it's not like copying someone's homework. The only way you're going to get this stuff to land is if you've got buy-in from leadership, you've got the resource, the people that are willing to do it, to drive these things forward. So we can give you the answers. If you can actually match it and deliver it, then that's on you basically. So but that recognition piece is huge, personally and from a brand point of view. And I bumped into loads of people at ISS and at British Gas who were like, we know who you are, you're the reason that we've come to this organization, because we've seen you and we've seen what you've got to say, and we believe that actually this is a place that we could sort of belong. So again, I think even for me that hadn't sunk into me. I just thought that's another great thing to put on my mantelpiece, to sort of show what I've done, not actually realizing that talent piece in terms of what other people are sort of observing and seeing,
Yeah.
that I'm a member of this organization, and therefore that was bringing people in. So yeah.
Amazing. I mean, in terms of that, I always feel like, I mean, like, and you must be the same as me, like, go to lots of awards in London. We do lots of stuff in London. There's lots of people in London. There's lots of DEI stuff kind of in London. It's almost like the M25 is this kind of like barrier.
Yeah.
And then you kind of like, yeah, exactly. And then it's kind of like, you go to kind of like other, like, places in the UK and kind of like elsewhere and all of that kind of stuff as well. I'm not going to get into the whole political side of things because we've only got 20 minutes. But in terms of kind of like, the policies that you've seen that get cascaded down that do help people working on the front line in FM businesses in Glasgow, Edinburgh, blah, 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 blah. What do you think's had a real impact for like on day-to-day people's lives within these organizations that aren't just about winning awards?
I think, I mean, it drives policy change in bits and pieces. So the carers network at Centrica British Gas, for example, their carers policy is more than a piece of paper, and there's portals, aren't there? Everyone has to log onto their portal. And like, oh God, like how does this work? You can't find anything. Like it's standard for HR systems, but when you're bringing a piece of paper to life, so the carers policy that was put in place at Centrica was 20 days of leave if you're a carer, which is massive. And there was a bit of data that came to me recently as part of our membership group, that 47% of carers are looking at reducing or leaving their role in the next 12 months.
Wow.
So if you're in a caring role, and this is very much that point where this is that pull on female talent as well. You've got women that are into their sort of 40s and 50s, where they're still potentially caring for kids. Like I've got a couple knocking around, but then your parents are equally getting that bit older and they need a bit more attention. So if I ended up going into a caring role for my parents in this example, the pressure of that would make me want to reduce my hours or leave in the next 12 months. Well, what happens? Like that's talent you've just drained out of the organization because you're not providing that support that actually helps those people from all levels of the organization, as you say there. So that, those sorts of things, that it's not, I don't like an us and them. I don't like you're from head office and you're a frontline worker. There shouldn't be that difference. And sometimes policies, this policy says, sometimes there needs to be a bit of pragmatism around that as well. And people just need a little bit of flexibility, and that'll come back in absolute spades 9 times out of 10, because, people are grateful that they've managed to, whatever it is that is needed in that moment of time, they'll be invested, they'll be there, they'll say it'll be returned in spades. So to be able to get that off of a piece of paper and into a culture across all of the organisation is absolutely critical.
Absolutely. Now, across the kind of DEI piece at the moment, like there's so many different facets. I mean, in terms of like, diversity and inclusion, LGBT, race, ethnicity, neurodiversity, all of that side of things, in terms of like how you kind of balance everything. And as part of kind of like a process that we were running, I got to speak to the head of DEI who works for a big, massive kind of like global media company. And he said a really interesting thing to me that stuck with me. This was not a pre-prepared question, so this is just going to be Kat's just going to answer this as she kind of goes. But
Go for it.
he said that the group that you need to engage before you engage any other group is straight white men, because they hold 95% of the power. And if you don't have them on board, then you're fighting a losing battle. So you need to engage them first. Being from such male-dominated kind of like environments, like when you are pushing all of these different kind of like, channels, all of these different areas, it can be information overload. Secondly, all of that kind of side of things. But if you could just, if there's somebody watching this who's a chief people officer who's sitting there trying to get this stuff through, or somebody who really wants to champion it within their organization, what advice would you give them, and what's worked really well for you in the past?
Yeah, I think it's such a good point, because inclusion is by definition everyone. But when you're focusing on, we've got a target and we've got a target and we've got a this and we've got a program, and it's all about sort of everyone else, that then doesn't feel very included. So yes, there needs to be activity to make sure that you are driving diversity in your organization. But that bit about getting straight white men involved. My son is a straight white man at the age of 16, and interestingly, so this project, this house renovation I was telling you about, we were trying to do it with an all-female construction team, because I like to put my money where my mouth is. And if we're going to do a big project, I didn't feel that I could just go to Bob the Builder around the corner and be like, please build my house. I felt like I needed to make a showcase out of it, which is probably why I burnt myself out at the end of last year. But we partnered with an amazing organisation called Work Boutique, who provide only female PPE. Amazing. I've been through that phase of my career where your crotch is around your ankles, everything's too long, you're in your dad's basically overalls. It's not safe, it doesn't look good, it doesn't look professional. So I partnered with this organisation. Amazing. They were sending boxes of stuff for the team, absolute boxes. This stuff came through the door, all sorts, boots, everything was bespoke. Rowan, my son, starts having a look in the boxes, and he said, "Oh, that's nice." He said, "That's not for you. No, that's a woman's fit. No, that's no." And what I'd done is completely excluded him by working with an organisation that was female only. And the thing that really stuck with me, he said, "I think you should have a word with this organisation, because it's not very inclusive, is it, if they only supply women's workwear?" And that's from his innocent perspective of not having my experience of having to wear rubbish kit my entire career. I thought this was golden. From his point of view, he'd been completely excluded by the entire exercise because he hadn't been provided men's PPE that fitted him. So so I can absolutely see his point of view. But that happens constantly in organizations, that there's some more research. Someone told me about 67% of senior leaders do not want to talk about D&I topics because they're scared of cancel culture, basically. So they'll just stay silent. So if you've got 67% of leaders, majority of them will be men, who are not talking about diversity inclusion topics, what is that going to look like for the culture of your organization? And the reason they don't want to talk about it is because, can't say that. Oh, don't say that. You got that wrong. Like, that's not, I mean, I'd be silent if people were picking holes in me all the time. I'd be like, I just won't say anything at all. Like, it's going to be easier if I just say silent. So actually, a piece of work I did at Centrica, which works absolutely brilliantly, was with some of our British gas engineers. And I went to a village hall local to me, and I met up with about 25 British gas engineers, all white, all between the ages of probably about 25 and 65. And I got introduced onto stage. Here's Kat, she's from head office. She's here to talk about diversity. And then this guy said, and look at the state of us. So I was like, already I was like, oh God, this is going to be really difficult. No agenda. I just said, like, I'm just here to chat. Like, this isn't like anything formal. I'm not going to be like, I need to say these pronouns. I said, right. I talked a bit about the menopause. I talked about bits and pieces, but I talked about it in a way that could relate to them. So I didn't do a big anatomy on like what the menopause is or anything, but I just said, you'll have partners, you'll have wives, you'll have kids, you'll have mothers, and they're going to be struggling with this stuff. So like, have you got any questions? And they were like, one guy said, my marriage is on the point of divorce. Like, I don't understand my wife at all. She's up, she's down, she's this, she's that. I just go out, I get wine and chocolate, and I come back when I feel it's going to be safe. And then we were talking about, some guy said, I said, ask me anything, like, can I say this? Can I say that? I said, ask me anything, like literally, like hit me. I did the vaginal dryness thing, worst thing you could possibly say. They were loving it. They were like, this is great. Can I say queer? I said, you can, but I wouldn't shout it at anyone. But again, it's like a personal preference thing. I don't like to be called queer. I like to be called a lesbian. But again, so it's just about sort of finding out. And one guy, he'd worked at the organisation for 20 plus years, was sat next to his colleague who had also worked for the same period of time. They started on the same day. And this guy said, this is great. I'm going to ring my brother on the way home. I'm going to say I can call him queer. And this other guy shot a look at him and he said, I've worked with you for 20 plus years. I didn't know your brother was gay. He said, well, it just never came up in conversation. So these sorts of things are not spoken about, but I said, well, do you know about our network? We've got a Pride network. You could learn more about this stuff. Oh, I've not really thought about it before because I'm not like one of the community. I said, but yeah, but it's like this is part of your life. Someone else's nephew was transitioning to be a niece, and there was a lovely joke about the fact that they'd sent him to private school and they'd quite like their money back, please, because now he was a girl. Again, bit of humour, nothing wrong with that. They all had a bit of a laugh, and then they were like, "How are you finding that? Like, do you find it difficult to say their new name? Like, do you have to like?" So they were all learning from each other. I could not shut them up. Like 2 hours, I was like, "Right, we need to stop it here." But just to give them that freedom to be like, "I'm not going to shoot you down. Just ask me the questions, and we'll do it in a light-hearted. We'll have a bit of a joke, and I'll answer anything you need."
Love that. That's really good. So for my final question, in terms of like, we'll obviously speak a bit in between now and then, but if we were going to record this interview again in another 5 years' time, because you were so emphatic about what you were going to do 5 years ago and you've overachieved on everything. So firstly, what's Kat's hair going to be doing in 5 years' time?
A
Crystal
great
ball.
question.
And secondly, from a career perspective, where do you want Diversity Umbrella to be? And I mean, obviously global, massive and all of that kind of stuff, but what do you think the challenges are coming down the line and what do you want to achieve in the next 5 years?
I love this. Hair-wise, this is staying. This is the look until I'm old and grey. My kids say I'll be on the back of a motorbike looking like this. I'd say for Diversity Umbrella, I think you mentioned earlier about that thing about London being very sort of this, and even our European Diversity Awards are London, and it is a hub. Everyone sort of has this big deal about coming into central London, but we're really branching out. We've got an event towards the end of this year in Berlin to announce the shortlist for the European Diversity Awards. So we're now making our strides to actually get out into the places that we're representing. So I want to do more of that. And
Can I just
equally,
make a shout out at this point because we there was a Spanish lady who came to your awards and for the European Diversity Awards, and she changed the law in Spanish Parliament, I think it was, and absolutely like incredible, absolutely incredible. But she spoke
oh
last year,
wow.
and it was absolutely amazing. And my partner and I were talking about that kind of like afterwards, but she was just absolutely amazing. It's one of the most inspirational things that you can ever see, and it's just amazing that you see it in different countries as
That's
opposed to
it.
just coming from London all the time as well. It really opened my mind. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, it's so key, and I think that's been a lot of the conversations we've had, especially through the membership lunches we have for the Global Inclusivity membership. These are global organizations, so everyone turns up not with just sort of one hat on. They're all global or European, trying to sort of talk about what they need to do to overcome different challenges in different countries based on law or political climate, etc. So I'd say I want to make more strides in that. I want to get more into Europe. I mean, I've got calls lined up with Australia. We've spread that far already in terms of people hearing about the work that we're doing. So I just want it to continue I mean, it's at quite a pace at the minute, but continue that. The more we open our doors, I think the more people will see the benefit in not only the awards themselves, but the membership, got obviously the blogs and the podcasts, and all this stuff will carry on coming, because it's about, I think for me, having been the person that has stood on the stage and you're in such shock that you've won, and everyone says, I've not prepared anything, and then you try and sort of garble something together, and then you're interviewed afterwards, and that's always, again, another sort of shock moment. You've had a quick glass of water, but you haven't got your thoughts together. So to be able to sort of give people the platform when everything's calmed down and you found a place to be able to put your award, yeah, you can see it, every day, to keep you sort of going. To actually talk about what they've done, like, how did you do this, and how does it make you feel that you've won this and been recognized? I think that's absolutely key for us moving forward, because it inspires others. And that point of my career when I actually knew what an employee network was, and I was involved and I was part of a women's network, and I was like, this is great, like, why doesn't everyone do this is brilliant. Like, we you kind of find your sort of your crew, you've got something in common, and that sort of, there's something about that energy of starting in those groups. And I think that would be my recommendation for anyone who wants to get into a diversity role. Get yourself in a network, get yourself out there, take on a role, whether it just be something, utilize it for your career as well. If people are sort of, as part of your review, saying, oh, you haven't got experience with managing budgets, then go and manage the budget for the network, go and manage the comms for the network, go and sort of show off what you're doing that bolsters your day job, because that's going to accelerate your career. And equally, it's such a nice space to just be really creative, and it's just not the sort of the normal day job. I think it really gave me a lot of energy. So yeah, to be able to now have got all the way through to this position where I'm not a corporate attending these awards, I'm hosting the awards, is just, absolutely phenomenal.
Excellent. Well, Kat, I think if anyone can push it through, I think you 100% will push it through. So I can't wait to see what you managed to achieve in the position. Thank you very much once again for taking part. I've got to give a massive shout out to Linda Riley and Lady Phil as well, just for being absolute role models and absolutely exceptional what you do, pushing it every single day as well. And happy Pride Month, everyone.